I stared at my phone screen for the 100th time that week, scrolling through the endless stream of congratulatory messages flooding my sister Maya's social media. Engagement photos with professional lighting and dreamy filters, dress shopping updates featuring her and mom laughing in boutique mirrors, venue tours of the grand ballroom at the Riverside Country Club, all shared with our extended family, college friends, and apparently everyone except me. 3 months of radio silence from my own family, and now I finally understood why. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the comments. Aunt Helen gushing about how beautiful Maya looked, my cousin Jessica offering to help with decorations, even my high school friends commenting with heart emojis and excited congratulations. People I'd grown up with, shared holidays with, celebrated milestones alongside, all part of an event I wasn't even supposed to know about. Sarah, you need to understand. Mom's voice crackled through the phone when I finally gathered the courage to call her that Thursday evening. Her tone was strained, careful, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed. According to YouTube analytics, 99% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. After what happened with the scholarship situation, Maya feels deeply betrayed by your actions. She needs space to heal from this, and we all think it's best if you respect that boundary. My chest tightened, the familiar weight of accusations settling over me like a heavy blanket. What happened with the scholarship? Mom, I earned that scholarship fairly and honestly. The Harrison Foundation Review Board made their decision based entirely on merit and community service records. You knew she was applying for the same scholarship, Sarah. You knew how much it meant to her future, how desperately she needed that financial support. You could have easily withdrawn your application to give her a better chance. I sank deeper into my apartment's worn couch, the secondhand cushions offering little comfort against the crushing weight of my family's disappointment. The Harrison Foundation Scholarship, a full ride to graduate school worth $60,000, had been Maya's publicly declared dream since our junior year of high school. She'd talked about it at every family dinner, mentioned it in her graduation speech, posted about it on social media whenever the application period opened. But it had been my private dream too, carefully nurtured through 4 years of relentless academic pursuit and community service. The difference was that I'd never felt entitled to announce my intentions, never assumed family support was guaranteed, never expected the world to step aside for my ambitions. I had absolutely no idea she was even applying until after I'd already submitted all my materials and recommendation letters. I whispered into the phone, but the line had already gone dead. Mom had hung up on me, something that had never happened in my 24 years of life. The next week brought a formal text message from Maya, delivered with the cold efficiency of a business communication. Due to recent circumstances and family dynamics, David and I have decided to keep our wedding celebration intimate and private. We hope you understand that this decision is final and ask that you respect our wishes during this special time. Recent circumstances, family dynamics, as if my academic achievement, the culmination of 4 years of sleepless nights, multiple part-time jobs, and countless hours of community volunteer work, was somehow a personal betrayal rather than something my sister should have been proud to celebrate alongside me. I tried calling Dad next, then my older brother Marcus, even reached out to Maya's fiancé, David, whom I'd known since our freshman year of college when he dated my roommate before eventually falling for Maya. Nothing but voicemails and read but unanswered text messages. The family I'd grown up loving unconditionally, supporting through their various crises and challenges, celebrating their successes as if they were my own. They had closed ranks against me with military precision, and I couldn't begin to understand why. The truth came in painful fragments over the following weeks, pieced together through mutual friends who couldn't quite meet my eyes when they spoke to me at the coffee shop near campus or the grocery store downtown. Apparently, Maya had been conducting what amounted to a strategic character assassination campaign, telling anyone who would listen that I had deliberately and maliciously sabotaged her scholarship application out of pure sibling jealousy. According to her version of events, I had used some mysterious family connections to sway the scholarship committee in my favor. She claimed I had stolen confidential information from her application materials and used them to strengthen my own submission. Most damaging of all, She had convinced everyone that I couldn't bear to see her succeed, that my actions were motivated by bitter resentment over her engagement and upcoming marriage, combined with jealousy that she was achieving major life milestones before me. None of it was true. Not a single accusation had any basis in reality. I had worked 3 different part-time jobs throughout college: tutoring at the Learning Center, shelving books at the library, and serving weekend shifts at a local restaurant, all to maintain the GPA necessary for scholarship consideration. While avoiding the crushing student debt that plagued most of my classmates, I had spent countless hours volunteering at the Eastside Community Center, tutoring underprivileged kids whose families couldn't afford academic help, organizing literacy programs for adult learners, and coordinating food drives during holiday seasons. This volunteer work had formed the cornerstone of my scholarship application, demonstrating the commitment to community service that the Harrison Foundation specifically sought in their recipients. My personal essay had focused on overcoming financial hardship and using education as a tool for positive social change, themes drawn directly from my lived experience of growing up in a working-class family where every dollar mattered. But Maya's version of events was simpler, more emotionally satisfying, easier to understand. The jealous younger sister who couldn't bear to see her sibling find happiness and success, willing to destroy family bonds to get ahead in life. I tried desperately to defend myself, sending long, carefully crafted emails to family members with documentation of my academic work, copies of my volunteer service records, even testimonials from the kids I'd tutored and the families I'd helped. But mudsticks, especially when it's flung by someone the family has always seen as the golden child, and family loyalty had already chosen sides based on Maya's tearful performances and carefully constructed narrative of victimhood. When Maya's bridal shower photos appeared online, Mom, both aunts, my female cousins, all the women who'd helped raise me and whom I'd considered my closest confidants, I finally accepted the devastating truth that would reshape my understanding of family bonds forever. I was completely and utterly alone. Graduate school became my sanctuary, the one place where my achievements were recognized and valued on their own merits. I threw myself into research with the intensity of someone who had nothing left to lose, spending 14-hour days in the laboratory and library, building the kind of academic reputation that the Harrison Scholarship had made possible. The program was rigorous and demanding, exactly the kind of challenge that allowed me to channel my pain into productive achievement. 18 months passed in a blur of coursework, research presentations, and published papers. I developed expertise in environmental policy analysis, contributed to studies on sustainable urban development, and began building a professional network that extended far beyond the small town where my family's judgment had once defined my worth. The pain of family rejection had settled into a dull but constant ache that I carried everywhere, like an old injury that flared up during emotional weather changes. But I had learned to function around it with increasing skill. My advisor, Professor Martinez, often commented on my work ethic and dedication, though I never told her that academic success had become my lifeline, the only validation available to me after losing the unconditional love I'd taken for granted my entire life. Awards and recognition from academic conferences became substitute family approval. Professional relationships filled some of the social void left by losing lifelong friends who'd chosen sides in a conflict they didn't fully understand. Then David called. It was a Tuesday evening in March, almost 2 years after the wedding I'd been banned from attending. I was grading undergraduate papers in my tiny graduate student apartment when my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in months. David's voice was strained, unfamiliar, carrying the weight of someone who hadn't slept properly in days and was struggling to maintain composure. "Sarah," he said, and I could hear him taking deep breaths to steady himself. I really need to talk to you about something important. Something about Maya that I think you need to know. Can we meet somewhere private?" We arranged to meet at a coffee shop across town the next afternoon, somewhere none of our old crowd would be likely to see us together. The location felt appropriate for clandestine meetings, dimly lit, filled with anonymous college students and freelance workers who paid no attention to anyone else's conversations. David looked terrible when he arrived, hollow-eyed and unshaven, wearing wrinkled clothes that suggested he'd been sleeping in them, carrying the unmistakable appearance of someone whose world had recently collapsed. He slid into the booth across from me with the careful movements of someone trying to hold himself together through sheer willpower. "I found something," he said without any preamble or small talk, sliding a thick manila folder across the scarred wooden table. She's been lying to everyone about everything, about the scholarship, about you, about our entire relationship. I need you to see this before I decide what to do next." Inside the folder were printouts of emails, bank statements, scholarship application documents, and what appeared to be a detailed timeline of events written in David's careful handwriting. My hands began shaking as I read through the materials, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise that illuminated a landscape of deception I could never have imagined. Maya had applied for the Harrison Scholarship 6 months after the official deadline had passed, when her application was automatically rejected for late submission, a fact clearly documented in the Foundation's email response. She had concocted an elaborate alternative explanation that painted me as the villain in her failure. The email trail showed her researching my application timeline through mutual contacts, crafting a detailed narrative that would explain away her disappointment while preserving her image as the perpetual victim of others' selfishness. But the scholarship deception wasn't even the worst part of what David had discovered. "She took out loans in my name to pay for the wedding." David's voice cracked as he spoke, the words seeming to cause him physical pain. "Forged my signature on loan applications. Used personal information she had access to because we lived together for 2 years before getting married. When I confronted her about mysterious debt showing up on my credit report, debt I never authorized or agreed to, she finally broke down and confessed everything." The room seemed to spin around me as I absorbed this information. Everything? The scholarship lie was just the beginning. The family manipulation, turning everyone against you, she planned all of it. She knew perfectly well that you'd earned that scholarship fairly and honestly. She admitted that she'd missed the application deadline because she was too busy planning the engagement party and assumed she could submit late materials without consequence. David's hands were shaking now too. "She said she couldn't bear everyone knowing that she'd failed at something so important while you succeeded, so she decided to make you the enemy instead of accepting responsibility for her own mistakes." The coffee shop's ambient noise faded to a distant hum as I processed the magnitude of Maya's betrayal, not just lying about events, but systematically destroying my relationships with people I loved in order to protect her own ego from the consequences of her poor planning and lack of follow-through. "How long have you known?" I managed to ask. "I started suspecting something was wrong about 6 months ago when bills kept arriving for loans I'd never heard of." Maya always had explanations: clerical errors, identity theft, bureaucratic mistakes. But when I started investigating on my own, David gestured helplessly at the folder of evidence. The wedding cost almost $40,000 more than what we'd budgeted. Money that came from loans she took out using my information without my knowledge or consent. 3 months later, David filed for divorce. The marriage had lasted barely 14 months total, crumbling under the weight of financial deception, identity fraud, and the slow realization that the woman he'd fallen in love with had never actually existed. The Maya he'd married was a carefully constructed fiction, designed to hide someone capable of destroying family relationships to avoid admitting a simple mistake. Maya's carefully constructed reality began unraveling faster than she could contain the damage, like a sweater with a pulled thread that kept coming undone no matter how frantically she tried to stop the process. The first major crack appeared when Aunt Helen, Mom's older sister, and the family's unofficial investigator of suspicious situations decided to fact-check Maya's version of the scholarship controversy. Helen was a retired legal secretary with 40 years of experience dealing with documentation and bureaucratic procedures, and something about Maya's story had never quite added up in her methodical mind. A few diplomatic phone calls to the Harrison Foundation's administrative office revealed the truth about application deadlines, selection criteria, and the timeline of my successful application. The Foundation's records showed that I had submitted all required materials 3 weeks before the deadline, that my academic credentials and community service record had placed me in the top tier of applicants from the beginning, and that Maya's application had never been considered because it arrived months too late to be included in the selection process. Armed with documentation that couldn't be argued with or explained away, Helen confronted Mom during what had been planned as a routine family dinner. The conversation that followed became legendary in our extended family's oral history. Voices raised in shock and anger, accusations flying in multiple directions. The painful dismantling of a year and a half of false narrative that had poisoned family relationships and destroyed trust between people who should have supported each other unconditionally. Marcus, who had been particularly cold and judgmental toward me during the scholarship controversy, sat in stunned silence as the evidence mounted. Dad, who prided himself on being a fair and rational man, struggled visibly with the realization that he had allowed himself to be manipulated into rejecting his own daughter based on lies designed to protect his other daughter's pride. Maya herself wasn't present for this confrontation. She had moved back into her childhood bedroom at Mom and Dad's house after the divorce, claiming various illnesses and emotional crises to avoid facing the extended family members whose opinion she'd systematically poisoned against me. Her absence from the family gathering where her deceptions were finally exposed spoke volumes about her awareness of what she had done and her inability to face the consequences with any dignity. But karma, it turned out, wasn't finished with Maya yet. The financial fraud that David had discovered wasn't limited to their marital relationship. Investigators following the trail of forged loan documents found that Maya had been supplementing her income through systematic theft from the upscale boutique where she worked as an assistant manager. The amounts were individually small but consistent over many months. $20 from the register here, falsified returns there, altered inventory records that allowed her to pocket cash from sales that officially never happened. Her employer had noticed discrepancies in their books for almost a year but hadn't been able to identify the source of the problem until Maya's increasingly desperate behavior after her divorce made her sloppy. Security cameras that had been installed to catch shoplifters instead revealed an employee who had been systematically embezzling funds to maintain the lifestyle she felt entitled to. Criminal charges followed with swift inevitability the same month that I received notification that my graduate thesis had been accepted for publication in Environmental Policy Quarterly, a prestigious peer-reviewed journal that would launch my academic career. Maya was facing 6 months in county jail for embezzlement and identity theft. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in our family. While they had been shunning me for allegedly unethical behavior in pursuing my education and career goals, Maya had been engaging in actual criminal activity to fund her fairy tale wedding and maintain appearances that were completely divorced from financial reality. The local newspaper covered her arrest and conviction, a small item buried in the crime section, but visible enough that former classmates and family friends became aware of what had really been happening behind the scenes of her picture-perfect life. The same social media accounts that had once showcased her engagement photos and wedding planning updates now became sources of whispered gossip and uncomfortable questions about how well anyone really knew the people in their lives. Mom called me on a Tuesday afternoon in October, exactly 2 years after I had been banned from the wedding that was supposed to celebrate Maya's happiness and new beginning. Her voice was small and broken in a way I had never heard before, stripped of the confident authority that had always characterized her communications with her children. Sarah, we were wrong about everything. I was wrong. Maya confessed the whole truth to me yesterday, about the scholarship, about the lies she told everyone, about why she really didn't want you at the wedding. She was afraid you'd somehow figure out what she'd done, expose her lies before she could successfully destroy your reputation first. I sat in my university office, surrounded by books and research papers, staring out at autumn leaves falling like golden tears against the gray October sky, and felt absolutely nothing. The vindication I had dreamed of for so long arrived hollow and anticlimactic, like opening a long-awaited gift only to find it empty inside. I know you might not be able to forgive us, Mom continued, her voice breaking with suppressed sobs. But I need you to know, I'm sorry. We're all sorry. We should have listened to you from the beginning. We should have known better. You were always the honest one, the reliable one. And we threw that away because we were too willing to believe a comfortable lie instead of investigating uncomfortable questions. The formal family apology came at Thanksgiving, a gathering I attended only after months of tentative phone calls, careful text message exchanges, and gradual reconciliation attempts from family members who seemed genuinely shocked by the extent of Maya's deception. The holiday felt surreal, familiar faces around the same dining room table where I'd grown up, but relationships fundamentally altered by everything that had happened. Maya was not there, of course. She was in court-ordered rehabilitation, a combination residential facility and counseling program designed to address what psychologists had diagnosed as pathological lying disorder, combined with narcissistic personality traits and impulse control deficits. Her absence felt both relieving and profoundly sad. The sister I had grown up with, shared childhood memories and teenage secrets with, had been replaced by someone I didn't recognize and wasn't sure I wanted to know. Marcus hugged me fiercely when I walked through the front door, tears streaming down his face without any attempt to hide his emotion. "I'm so sorry, sis. I was such a complete idiot. You were always the most honest person in this family, and we chose to believe the easier story because it was more comfortable than admitting Maya might not be perfect." Dad couldn't speak at all when he first saw me, just held me tight against his chest and whispered broken apologies against my hair while his shoulders shook with suppressed grief for the time we'd lost and the pain his poor judgment had caused. But it was David who provided the final piece of Karma's intricate puzzle. He found me by the kitchen window after dinner, stepping away from the crowd of relatives who were all eager to make amends but didn't quite know how to navigate the complex emotional landscape of betrayal and forgiveness. "You should probably know," he said quietly, his voice still carrying traces of the trauma that Maya's deceptions had inflicted on him. "Maya asked me to give you a message when I told her I'd be seeing you today. She wants to meet with you when she gets out of the rehabilitation program next month. She says she needs to apologize to you directly, face to face, for everything she did." "What did you tell her?" "That it's not up to me to make that decision." "But Sarah?" He touched my shoulder gently, the gesture of someone who understood the weight of betrayal and the complexity of healing. "I hope you'll consider it when you're ready, not for her sake. She doesn't deserve consideration after what she put everyone through, but for your own peace of mind." I watched what carrying all that guilt and shame did to her, how it poisoned every aspect of her life. Don't let carrying anger and resentment do the same thing to you. 6 months later, I did agree to meet with Maya. The encounter took place in a supervised visitation room at the rehabilitation center, where she was completing the final phase of her court-ordered treatment program. She looked smaller somehow, fragile, in a way I had never seen before, stripped of the confident social presence that had always defined her public personality. "I destroyed everything," were her first words to me, spoken without preamble or any attempt to ease into the conversation gradually. "My marriage, my relationship with the entire family, my reputation in the community, my career prospects, any chance of financial stability, and worst of all, I destroyed your trust in the people who should have loved you unconditionally regardless of circumstances." We talked for almost 3 hours in that sterile room with its institutional furniture and monitoring cameras. Maya explained the psychological patterns her therapist had helped her identify and understand. The paralyzing fear of being seen as a failure by people whose opinions mattered to her. The desperate need to maintain the image of perfection that our family and social circle had projected onto her since childhood. The spiral of increasingly elaborate lies that became easier to maintain than confronting simple truth about missing a deadline. I was so afraid of disappointing everyone, so terrified of admitting that I'd made a stupid mistake, that I chose to disappoint and hurt the one person who never would have judged me, she said, tears streaming down her face as she spoke. "You would have celebrated with me when I finally got accepted to graduate school on my second try. You would have helped me figure out how to pay for it, probably would have shared study materials and advice. Instead, I turned you into the enemy to protect my pride, and I lost everything that actually mattered." I left that meeting feeling something I hadn't expected: genuine pity. Maya had gotten everything she thought she wanted: the perfect wedding, the family's unwavering support, protection from consequences and criticism. And it had destroyed her life more thoroughly than simple failure and honest disappointment ever could have. 3 years after the wedding I never attended, I walked across a different stage entirely. My doctoral graduation ceremony was small and intimate, meaningful precisely because it represented genuine achievement rather than social performance. Mom, Dad, and Marcus sat in the front row of the university auditorium, cheering enthusiastically when my name was called, and I received the diploma that represented 6 years of sustained academic effort. David came to the graduation too, having become an unexpected friend through our shared experience of surviving Maya's systematic deceptions. He had rebuilt his life with impressive resilience, finding work as a financial advisor, specializing in helping people recover from identity theft and financial fraud, turning his painful personal experience into professional expertise that helped others. Maya sent a card from the halfway house where she was completing the final phase of her rehabilitation program before being released to supervised probation. Inside, written in her careful penmanship that I remembered from childhood thank you notes, "I'm proud of you, Sarah. I always was, even when I was too sick to admit it. I'm sorry it took losing everything to find the courage to say that out loud." The reception after graduation was everything a celebration should be: genuine joy, honest accomplishments recognized and appreciated, love given and received without conditions or hidden agendas or unspoken resentments. Professor Martinez, my thesis advisor and academic mentor, pulled me aside as the evening wound down and people began saying their goodbyes. "You know what impresses me most about you, Sarah? Not just the exceptional quality of your research, though that speaks for itself. It's how you handled adversity with such remarkable grace and dignity. Lesser people would have become bitter and resentful, would have used their pain as an excuse to stop trying or to treat others badly. You let it fuel your determination. Instead, and that's the mark of genuine character." I thought about that assessment as I drove home to my apartment that night, diploma resting carefully on the passenger seat beside me. Grace and dignity. I wasn't entirely sure I had handled anything with grace. Mostly I felt like I had just tried to survive each day, to build something meaningful from the wreckage of family rejection and social isolation. But maybe that was what grace looked like from the inside. Maybe dignity wasn't about grand gestures or perfect responses to crisis, but about continuing to choose truth and kindness and hard work even when the people you loved most chose lies and cruelty and the easy path of willful ignorance. Karma, I finally understood, wasn't about cosmic punishment or divine revenge. It was simply about consequence, natural, inevitable results of choices made over time. Maya had chosen deception and manipulation, and she paid with isolation, criminal conviction, and the complete destruction of every relationship that had ever mattered to her. The family had chosen willful blindness and loyalty to comfortable lies, and they paid with guilt, regret, and the loss of precious time with someone they claimed to love. I had chosen truth and hard work and maintaining my integrity even when it cost me everything I thought I needed. And I paid with temporary loneliness, but lasting self-respect, with immediate pain but eventual validation, with short-term isolation but long-term peace of mind. The universe didn't need my help to balance the scales of justice. It just needed me to keep being myself, to trust that character and integrity would ultimately matter more than temporary appearances or social approval. A year later, I accepted a prestigious position at a research institute across the country, the kind of career opportunity that the Harrison Scholarship had made possible and that my graduate work had prepared me for. The farewell dinner my family organized was bittersweet. Relationships rebuilt, but forever changed by the knowledge of how fragile trust could be and how quickly love could turn conditional when tested by crisis. Maya was there for that dinner, out of rehabilitation, and working as a cashier at a grocery store while slowly rebuilding her life from nothing. She looked healthier than she had in years, more genuine and authentic than I could remember seeing her since we were children. The persona of perfection had been stripped away by consequences, revealing someone who seemed more human and relatable despite everything she had done. When she hugged me goodbye at the end of the evening, she whispered in my ear, "Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. I hope someday I can be half as brave as you were." As my plane lifted off the runway the next morning, I pressed my face to the small window and watched my hometown shrink to miniature size below. I was leaving behind a decade of pain and healing, carrying with me the hard-won wisdom that sometimes the greatest victory isn't in being publicly vindicated, but in remaining true to yourself when everyone else loses their way. The scholarship that had inadvertently started this entire ordeal had indeed changed my life, not just through the education and opportunities it provided, but through the character test it had inadvertently created. I had learned that family love could be conditional, that truth didn't always triumph quickly or easily, and that sometimes standing alone was the necessary price of standing for what was right. but I had also learned that karma wasn't cosmic revenge or divine intervention. It was simply the universe's way of demonstrating that choices have consequence, that character matters more than perception in the long run, and that dignity is something no one can take away from you if you refuse to surrender it voluntarily. In my new city, with my new career and hard earned wisdom about human nature and family dynamics, I finally understood what genuine peace felt like. Not the absence of conflict or challenge, but the presence of unshakable self respect. Not the need to prove my worth to others or win their approval, but the quiet confidence that came from knowing I had earned everything I had achieved through honest effort and maintained my integrity under the worst possible circumstances. The wedding I had been banned from attending had indeed revealed the truth about everyone involved, their character, their priorities, their capacity for growth or self deception. Just not the truth Maya had intended to hide when she orchestrated my exclusion from what should have been a family celebration. And that, perhaps, was the most perfect and poetic justice of all.